record this meeting now. This meeting should now be recorded. And before we begin the official Q&A session, Roger, Craig, do you want to have anything you want to tell the student populace?
I'll just say hi, I'm Roger, I'm the new chair of the department. I'm a particle physicist working on IceCube, and thank you for inviting me.
And I'm Craig Heinke. I'm the old associate chair for grad studies, and thank you for inviting me too.
Wonderful. Oh, wonderful. Thank you both. We really do appreciate you taking the time to answer our questions, especially this being a time where a lot of students may have a lot of questions about how the new year is going to go. So let me quickly copy the address. Let me share the screen.
Or you could just drop the address in the chat. Would also work.
Yes, that is, let's see. How do I get to the chat? There's a chat. Here is the link. So I'm gonna let a couple of people in from the waiting room. And so what's gonna happen is I just popped a link into the chat, and this will take you to a Google Slides feature where you can enter your questions. You can click this button if you do want to not have your name displayed alongside your question. And yeah, I'll be able to see this as we go along, and we will pull them up in the latter half of the Q&A. So this is what it'll look like. If you go to that page, there will be a bunch of questions, and you will be able to upvote them and downvote them, depending on if that's similar to the questions you wanted to ask. And this will go to the top of the queue. Before we begin, I just wanted to situate everyone by giving a brief look at the summary of the town hall survey. These are kind of the responses that we got asking what are your main topics of interest for this Q&A and also for the town hall. And it looks like there's a lot of stuff, I mean, questions around COVID-19 and return to campus issues. So we are going to dig a bit into that, and questions about TA duties and course selection. Oh, Logan, thank you for pointing out that I sent the link to everyone in the waiting room, which is no one, instead of everyone in this room itself. So that is now the link that you should click for the questions. Excellent. So just a quick breakdown of what these interests within these each main topics are. So for TA duties, workload is a big question for a lot of people. Supervisory committee, it seems like there's broad interest in many of the different aspects of being supervised here. And for course selection, as maybe we'll see in a question that comes up, course offerings have been a frequent point of contention for a lot of graduate students. So maybe we can have a little bit of a discussion about that. Great. So why don't we just go ahead and get started with the Q&A. So to start off with, these are questions just from the GPSA. And so the first question to Professor Heinke, can you tell us about, so this upcoming academic year has maybe a larger cohort of graduate students than normal. And we have this previous year's cohort who have actually never really experienced being on campus and the normal day-to-day activities of being a graduate student. So this is kind of a broad question, but can you break down any changes that have come up to TA allocations, to office space, and graduate student awards, given this kind of new year with a large number of graduate students?
Right. So I'll start with the easy one, which is grad awards. And those are basically the same as they always are. There's no changes. We tell you about, well, no changes that I'm aware of so far. I advertise grad awards and can find superfluid helium-3 from time to time. I advertise awards to the general populace from time to time, and people send them in, and we have the grad awards committee chooses which ones we will nominate, usually from the department. There are a couple of awards that we'll be citing on in the next few weeks, which are just within the department alone, but most of them go on to FGSR and have to compete against other departments and so on. So that's straightforward. The other two are trickier. office space and TAs. Both of these are normally a bit of a game of chicken around this time of year, where we appear to be speeding towards going off a cliff, and at the last moment, everything works out. Office space, we have a bunch of new students coming in, and we do not have room to put them on. Now, at the moment, that's not as big of a problem because not everybody is on campus, and that will probably be the case for a while. But it's a general problem that we have, that we admit students and we don't quite have enough grad student office spaces for all of them at first. And so what happens, however, is that around this time of year, we have about 1/2 of all the master's students are scheduling their defenses between now and September 15th. And they all defend their master's theses and then scoot out, as well as some of the PhD students. And so then we end up having the spots, maybe not immediately at the beginning of September, but a couple students are usually waiting for a grad student office space until a little ways into September. Now, at this moment, with many students actually being reluctant to come onto campus, this may be less of an issue than it normally is. But so that's one angle there. The other issue is TA allocations. Of course, during the pandemic, TAing is weird because we've had, at least last year, the labs were take-home labs for the major intro courses. We are in a state of kind of uncertainty about exactly what's happening in the near future. And I won't talk about what's going on with labs. That's for Al to talk about. I'll just say that there's some uncertainty about exactly how we're going to manage that. And so that leads to uncertainty in how the TAing will work. The total number of TAs will probably be similar to previous years. This is another area where there's a bit of a careening towards a cliff, in that we have promised more TAs to students than we can actually allocate. And we depend upon, during August, a number of professors to buy out students. They discover, actually, I do have the money to buy out a student for fall or winter term, whatever. And so they do this, they buy them out with RAs, and so then we end up having enough to allocate all the TAs. In the past, although it always looks kind of terrifying as we approach this moment, we end up with enough profs buying out their students that we end up with extra TAs that we can allocate to students who are beyond their funding allocation, and students who, for one reason or another, they or their supervisor want them, although they've been allocated an RA for their time here. They ask to have a TA for a certain term or something, and we've been able to do that. And then we've even sometimes had some extras that we even have to recruit a few undergrads to help with the TAing. There's no guarantee that we'll be in that situation this year. It's always a little bit of a cross our fingers and hope everything works out. So that's where we're at the moment as well on that. Yeah, so I will stop there and let Roger take a question.
Maybe just to
if you have a follow-up, go for it.
When do we expect more clarity around this TA, and when do we expect some communication about allocations, and when can students expect to hear more about TA? Right. So there's several things up in the air. One of them is how exactly we'll be running the first year labs. That's a big question we haven't quite nailed down yet. And then there's a question how the TAs are assigned. So I think the time scale that we're looking at, so Al wants a list of TAs that is something close to final around August 23rd. So that's early next week. So he can then start plugging students into TA slots for courses, right? And so you can make this all connection. This is a big job that will eat up a huge amount of Al's time over that couple weeks. And the more profs who think they can actually let us know about a person who's going to be an RA earlier, the better, right? If they do this, sometimes professors wait until September 8th or something to tell us, oh, actually I want to buy out this student. And then that means you have to move around TA things and so on like that. So ideally that not too much of that would happen, but we never know. And of course there's the very tricky business at the moment of students who are arriving late due to visa issues. And I'm sure we'll discuss that a little bit more later, but obviously that affects the TAing policy too, because if you have a student who arrives halfway through the term, it may be difficult for them to take a TA. So I'll stop there. Great. Yeah, we do have that question coming up afterwards, but let's give an opportunity to Professor Moore. Let me quickly share this slide again. So the kickoff question for you is that around changing guidelines. So the university return to campus guidelines have been changing rapidly over the past few weeks and maybe even more rapidly over the past few days. And unlike many other universities in Canada, it seems like the U of A, due to many recent reasons that may be outside the control of the U of A, is not going to mandate vaccines, although mask mandates are back on. So can you explain more about the steps the university is taking to ensure the safety of students, and also maybe just kind of give a background of what is the current state as we know it of these steps that are being taken for return to campus guidelines?
So to illustrate how rapidly changing the situation is, now vaccines are going to be mandated, or at least so the new rules, which I think got circulated to everyone, I hope most of you got it, are that the university, as of, was it 2 days ago, switched to requiring either that you have proof of vaccination, and quite what that means is not yet sorted out, and whether or not they're going to require proof and how much proof is also not yet sorted out. They originally started by just saying it would be you would self-attest, but in the Edmonton Journal this morning, they were saying they were backing off on that, and it sounded like they were going to ask for some proof of vaccination status. So the university is going to require in some degree that you say whether or not you're vaccinated. If you are not vaccinated, you will be required to do frequent rapid testing to make sure that you have not got COVID. Now, how the schedule of that testing and what those requirements are going to be have not yet been sorted out. But I think that the big thing here now is that everybody on campus will either be vaccinated or will be tested in the past day or so to make sure that they have not got COVID. And if you have COVID, you will be required to isolate and not come to campus. I think the initial guidelines that came out were 10 days. But these things are so new that there are no real details associated with it. And I'm not the only chair who has been asking up the chain of command for details, please. And we are still waiting to get the details because they're still working them out. I think that the reason for that has been that the provincial government, or at least our premier, is not, shall we say, a big fan of requiring vaccinations. And it's basically taken all three major universities working together in Alberta to pluck up the courage to actually come up with this plan. And so I think that was where the effort was going in the previous days, and that now they are working out the details of exactly what that means and the exact sort of administrative details. So things are still very much in flux, and they are not yet. I mean, there will be more information coming out. I would expect maybe even in the next day or two coming out on how that will be implemented. But the big thing is that vaccination or rapid testing will be a requirement to be on campus, which I think is a huge deal that a vast number of people wanted to see. The other thing that they released, I think it was yesterday, was the results of the well, I call it unscientific survey of students, faculty, and staff, basically asking how many people were vaccinated, and the vaccination rates were enormous, right? I think it was 91% of students said they were vaccinated. It was 96% of support staff and 97% of faculty said that they were vaccinated. Now, of course, it's unscientific because it was just, you weren't required to respond. It was just a random sample of whoever chose to respond. But it was, I think they said over, was it 23 or 25,000 respondents? So which is a large fraction of the community. So I think there is reason to be optimistic that the vast number of people in our community are vaccinated. But anyway, even those that aren't will be tested on some sort of frequent basis to know that they're free of COVID on campus. And I think that's a huge thing. The other thing that we have done, because we did this before they were mandating vaccines, was we have got in a large stock of N95 masks, which was designed, which the original intent was for TAs. Now, exactly how that's going to be used, this was for TAs in the labs who are going to be working with students in the labs. Now, quite what that's going to mean now in terms of the new rules on masks and how that's going to play out with the vaccine, we have not yet decided, but we do have a reasonably large stock of masks to help there.
Great. Thank you, Roger. Maybe just two follow-ups there. One question that we got through the slides is, do you have any information about which vaccines are going to be like acceptable? Because I don't know what the Canadian equivalent of the like FDA or what the approval is of like Chinese vaccines versus the mRNA vaccines. Is there anything you can share about that?
I do not know anything for certain at this point. There have been no details given, but I would not, I mean, my expectation will be is they will use the same guidelines as the federal government. So I think it will have to be, you know, so I mean, there's requirements to count as vaccinated when coming into Canada across the border, which is basically any vaccine that is approved for use in Canada is okay. And I think I would be astounded if they deviate from those rules, given that there are established rules out there. But that is not for certain, and it will depend on whatever they come up with.
Okay, and maybe, do you know anything about maximum classroom sizes? Is there any limit on occupancy rates within labs or big classrooms?
The occupancy rates, my understanding is that they will go back to their normal values. And so basically you will have to be, if you can't maintain 2 meters social distancing, then you have to, in public areas and in rooms where you cannot maintain a 2 meter spacing, masks are going to be required. So, I mean, my guess, but my understanding is, and certainly the way we've been planning is that, you know, the 300 seat classrooms will have up to 300 undergrad students in them. And it's the same for the TAs with the labs. I mean, obviously their students are not packed in quite as closely, but 24 students in a lab is the typical sort of number with the TA. So that is what we are planning for, and that's what we've been told, is that occupancy limits will be back to normal, but there will be masks and the vaccine mandate.
Okay, great. So maybe let's move on to some other questions. I'm seeing something in the chat about being unable to ask questions using the link. I don't know why that is the case, but maybe one of the workarounds we can do is, if you are unable to ask questions through the link, private chat it to either Max, Logan, or Zoe, and they will be able to put that in for you. So let me quickly share the screen again.
It might be, you have to use your, yeah, exactly. You have to use your UAlberta account. So you might be opening it with a different Google account. So you might just have to check that.
Great.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And let me share. Oh, I think I'm sharing the wrong thing. Town Hall Q&A slides. Again, if you need the link, it is at the top here. But now I'm going to ask some of the questions that came in through the Google form that we sent out a week or two ago. So this is exactly what you were hinting at, Craig, international graduate student issues. What are the alternatives planned for international students who won't be able to arrive for the start of the year?
Right. So this is tricky. We're at a point where this is not really a university policy. The department can't enforce a particular policy on here. It's kind of up to individual instructors. And so I've been keeping the individual instructors who are teaching courses that are relevant for grad students, the 500 level and 600 level, and also the 400 level courses that are relevant. I've been keeping them aware of the fact that there are a certain number of students who might not arrive in time for classes, or even if they do, maybe stuck in quarantine. If they haven't had their full vaccination shots, they might be stuck in quarantine for 2 weeks and not able to attend classes, especially at the very beginning. So I've been encouraging them to think of solutions that may be helpful for them. And people are thinking of different possibilities. So some professors have already taught the same course before and have taped everything. And so they can provide those tapes online that match what they're doing in the classroom. So the students who are able to attend in person may be able to have that. And then the students who are not able at the beginning can instead be watching those and then having office hours with the professor to kind of catch up any questions they may have. So that's one possibility. Another possibility, we have these devices called OWLs, which some of you may have heard of, that are designed to be a kind of relatively simple way, although it's not guaranteed that every professor will choose them, but we have ways of trying to maintain video during the class. And so if you have a live class and you have a professor at the front and students asking questions, the owl actually turns and takes pictures of whoever is talking, and it does it pretty well, I think. So hopefully that's an option some people may choose. So it'll be up to the individual instructor to figure out how best to accommodate a student who's stuck. But we have confidence that they'll figure out ways to address that.
And could you also comment on if there are TAs, if they're international students, and how that will affect their TA?
Yeah, so that will, again, I'll have to work this out with Al discussing this a little bit. But we do have, so the nice thing is the labs don't start until 2 weeks in, and typically the marking also of homework obviously will not start immediately. It starts a little ways into the class, and also typically the amount of work that's required for a TA kind of builds up during the term. So if somebody comes in 2 or 3 weeks late, that's not the end of the world. Especially, I mean, if they're just stuck in quarantine or something, oftentimes there's grading and such that can be done there. So we're going to have to, this will involve a lot of work to try to assign people to the right activities that they can manage, but I think this is manageable. A trickier business is the TA boot camp, which we generally schedule for the first day of classes, and there'll be students who won't be able to attend that, and so we'll have to figure out some way of getting the information to them. And again, I'm not exactly sure what that will look like, but we will figure out something that works.
Great, thank you. I don't know, Roger, if you want to also comment on that, or we can go on to the next question.
I think Craig basically covered everything. I mean, we're working on recording the lectures as the initial stopgap, and yeah.
Great. So let's move on to the next question, and maybe Roger, you'll be able to give a question about this. So are there answer to this? Are there any contingency plans for university shutdown, especially given some of the rising rates of the Delta variant? So maybe Roger, do you want to start us off?
So to be honest, I have not seen any contingency plans for this. Within the department, I think we are, having taught all the courses online last year, I think we are probably well equipped to switch. At least we are certainly vastly better prepared than we were in March of 2020, where it happened without warning. So I think having had a year of online teaching, I'm not particularly concerned about that. I mean, yes, there will be some disruption, and yes, it will have to be managed. But with a year of experience in teaching these courses online, I think there will be disruption, but it will be much, much less than it was a year and a bit ago when we did it with zero preparation. So I certainly at the department level, I mean, that's basically our plan, is we would just switch to online teaching. At the higher levels, I've not been made aware of anything that's going on for contingency planning. There have been certainly requests from multiple people at multiple different levels for contingency planning, and I think there probably is contingency planning at the higher levels, but they aren't wanting to share it at the moment, simply because they want everybody to concentrate on getting back and not worrying about shutting things down again. But I think, to be honest, given the province's response and the attitude they're taking, I think a shutdown is probably very unlikely. Given the vaccination rates we've got, particularly the vaccination rates in the university community, if that survey is accurate, I mean, I think at some point, right, you know, if everybody's vaccinated, this is basically as good as it's going to get, and COVID probably isn't going to go away. And I think the attitude is more moving towards learning how to deal with it, mitigating serious risks, but learning how to live with it. So even if we have a shutdown, I would expect it to be for a short period, just to get the cases under control so that the hospitals can deal with them. But we may find that we've got very high cases and very low hospitalization rates because of the vaccinations. So fingers crossed, this is just a hypothetical question, but I think we are, that's not one of my major concerns. I'll put it that way.
Great, thank you. Maybe we'll just move on to the next question. let me share the screen again. This will be the last question that we have from the Google form, and then we'll move on to questions that everyone has been asking on this slide app. So if you have more questions, please put them here. This is a kind of a big question. I've grouped a lot of stuff together here, but this is mostly about course offerings and questions about what counts. Can you take courses from other departments to count towards your degree as a graduate student? And then about offerings. A lot of people asked about a possible quantum field theory course. This seems like a big desire from the student body. So is there any procedure for this to be offered within the next year? And then I also put in this comment that was made, which we've heard from quite a few students about some courses. So this is more a sentiment than a question, but maybe you can also respond to that. So maybe Craig, you want to start us off, and then we'll get Roger to also comment on this.
Sure, that's very logical. Thank you. So I'll just take these one at a time. So first, does taking courses from other departments count towards a degree? So there are requirements that we have within the physics department, and then, so those are broad requirements, and then the additional requirement is that the plan you have for your courses should be approved by your supervisory committee. And the supervisory committee only meets once a year. Basically, you want to run it by your supervisor for general opinions, and they could, I suppose, get the advice of the rest of the supervisory committee at any point. So let me back off and tell you what are the overall physics requirements, right? So the overall physics requirements are that for the master's degree, that you take 4 courses for the master's degree, of which 2 have to be graduate level courses within the physics department. And one of the 4 courses should be, and I guess one of those 2, should be one of the core 3 courses, advanced stat mech, quantum mechanics, or E&M. And then for the PhD, you're supposed to have 2 additional courses besides the one you took for the master's. And by the PhD time, you should have 2 of those 3 courses. They can be all taken in the master's, and so you don't have to take another one if you took those then. In rare circumstances, you can get approval from the supervisory committee, and then for me to have adjustments to that. But you should basically take those as being the basic requirements. Now, I say that, but that doesn't mean that you can choose any selection of courses you want to take. Courses that should count for your master's and PhD level should be 400 and above, and should be logical for your degree. They should be something that your supervisor and supervisory committee basically approve of. So that's basically the rule, but that gives you a lot of options. I mean, there are quite a number of students who take an engineering course or 2, or math or stats course or 2 towards a degree, and that's perfectly fine, or even chemistry or whatever. So there's a variety of different things depending on what your interests and what the course your research goes. Any quick questions on that before I go on? Or is that clear?
I'm not seeing anything in the questions, and don't think there's anything in the chat.
Okay,
So
we can come back to it if people have questions later. So the next one, is it possible to have quantum field theory offered in the next year? So we tend to make up the plans for what the courses will be in about May of each year. So I mean, it's sometimes we might be able to squeeze something in if we have a list of at least 5 students who are interested in taking a course in a certain semester, and we have a professor who's willing to do it, then we can kind of squish that in, right? But that's a little tricky. So yeah, so I'll just leave it at that, because we have limitations on how many courses we can offer, and there's limitations because we have only a certain number of grad students to get enough courses to actually make them worthwhile. There's a limit on that. And then the last point, which you've taken it down, but I remember it basically was saying that there are certain people were warned to stay away from certain professors, and then that leaves not a lot of good options or interests. It's true there are not a lot of grad courses, and some of our professors seem to be better liked for their teaching by students than others, but I will refrain from going into any details on that. I'll just say it's problems that we are aware of, and they're very hard to deal with. So yeah, there are always grad courses available for all interests, whether you're happy with the professors is going to vary over time. And as I mentioned, there's alternatives in other departments that can work. So yeah, this is going to be a continuing discussion because it's a hard problem to solve. But I encourage people to come and talk to me more about issues that they have. Okay, so I'll stop there, and if anybody has follow-up, hit me with that.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but Roger, maybe do you want to comment on any of this before we?
Well, I could comment on the quantum field theory because my job back then was actually ACU, who was putting together a lot of these teaching schedules. So with the quantum field theory, we did actually consult faculty and asked for how many students. We came up with a prediction. We were asking how many students would be in that course. And that was what the decision was based on, is the fact that there were not many. I mean, there was some interest, there was definitely some interest, but it was from a very small number of students. And with limited resources, we have to offer the courses that are going to be appealing to most students. Having said that, if there are people who really want to have quantum field theory, then your best bet is to talk to your supervisor. And if you're doing QFT, I would guess that you'll probably have a supervisor who's in the particle theory group, or the cosmology group. So talk to your supervisor. They can always elect to offer a reading course which you can take. They don't get credit for teaching it from the department, so you may have a little bit of an uphill battle with your discussion with your supervisor, but it is possible for them to offer the course as a reading course, or even as a regular course, if they've got, so if there's 2 or 3 of you all with the same supervisor who all wants the course, you might have a bit more luck getting that through. But it is possible, but it would have to be an instructor saying, I'd like to offer this course to these students as a reading course, and then we can do it. But yeah, unfortunately, there just were not enough students. I know there was a demand for that course. There just weren't enough students to actually run it as an official course, unfortunately.
Great, thank you. So there might be some questions, but I'm going to go to the top rated questions in the slide app.
Can I just hit one quick thing? So Allison brings up a very good point that I should have mentioned. It says the requirements are different for geophysics students. And let me just, that's absolutely right. And I should have mentioned that before, that of course, the number of courses required for an MSc or a PhD in the geophysics specialization is different, or sorry, is the same, but instead of requiring one of those 3 courses, electromagnetism, stat mech, or quantum mechanics, there's only the one course that's required for all geophysics students to have at some level for either the master's or the PhD, and that's the global geodynamics, if I remember correctly.
Great, thank you. Let me share the screen for our first question from the live slides. So this is from Shafat, and I think Zoe kind of touched on this, but this question is about professors hiring RAs. Yeah, so maybe those students will not have, will those students not have TA positions for that term? Can students apply for RA positions? And Craig, yeah.
So I think Zoe answered it very nicely. Basically, the RA position is where the professor pays your salary just to do research rather than a TA. And so not all professors have the same level of grants, and so some can afford this and others can't. And so ideally we'd have loads of these, and some professors are able to do this often for their students, and others are not. There's no set way to apply for it. You can ask your supervisor, but that doesn't guarantee that he or she will be able to achieve that.
Great, thank you. Let me get the next question up, which is by Zoe, about new international students who have to TA in person, but do not have access to vaccines, or did not prior to the school year, especially given it takes about 2 weeks for vaccines to kind of take effect, whether it's first dose or second dose. And then I guess related to that is, how do people get these rapid tests?
So I can tell you that there is no information on that yet. Sorry, I wish I wish there were, but as I said, I mean, they've just come out with this policy. It was negotiated between the universities, and that's where the effort was going. They are developing these now, and I expect very shortly, if not, within the next day or two, there will be some release of that information, but we just don't have it. But in the meantime, the University Health Center is handing out vaccinations. So, it does take a time to get vaccinated, but if you aren't vaccinated, please go to the University Health Center and the pharmacy. Both of them are doing, I think they're doing different ones. One's doing Pfizer and the other's doing Moderna, or at least that used to be the case. It may have changed by now. But there are places on campus where you can get the vaccines. So start the vaccination. It's never too late. It's never too early to start getting vaccinated. And then you will not have to do all this testing. You can stop the testing sooner. So yeah, start the vaccination process as soon as you possibly can. And there will be details posted on what the rapid testing requirements are. But within, I would hope, the next few days.
Great.
And maybe I should add just briefly onto that, if you're coming in and you're not vaccinated and you're assigned in-person work, and that concerns you, then please talk to your supervisor and talk to our director of UGL Labs, Al Meldrum, if you're feeling unsafe, and we'll try to find ways to accommodate that as well.
Great. Maybe Craig, I don't know if you have Al's email address or contact details. Maybe you can put that in the chat just to make it easier for anyone who's concerned.
Yes, I'll do that.
Wonderful. Let me share the next question, which is about courses. There were courses like selected topics in theoretical physics for particle experimentalists, which were marked as to be announced, but there was no follow-up. Will these courses be available?
I must admit, as a particle experimentalist, I've never seen a course marked like that. So what course does anybody know the course number?
Yeah, this might be one of those selected topics, 5699, 599, something like that. But
there's 495, which is selected topics in physics, but it's not specifically particle physics or theoretical. Well, there's a 699, but again, that's not, I think, specific to particle physics. So that was the confusing part. We have these 699 and 495, 595 cross-listed course. Those are selected topics, and those are picked based on a combination of instructors who've asked to give those courses and demand from graduate students and from undergraduate students if it's a 495, 595 course. And typically we have somewhere in the region of 3 to 4 of those courses each year. I think this year we've got 2 condensed matter courses. I think there's 1 astrophysics course, and I can't remember what the other course is. We've got two condensed matter courses, one astrophysics course, and we have a 635 course, which is a graduate plasma physics course, but we don't have a 699 this year. So we've got three 495 courses and a plasma physics 600 level course.
And Craig, I don't know if you want to add anything on top of that.
I am incredibly lucky having the guy who has actually been running class assignments be here on this call, so he can answer all these questions in much better detail than I could.
Okay, great. Then we will move on to the other question. So this is about if you're coming in with a master's degree from a different university, how many courses do you need to take? Some of the course requirements have been changing recently, so maybe it's good to get clarity for both master's and PhD students.
Right. So let me take a whack at this. So coming from a master's from a different university is not doesn't mean the same thing for every master's. Some masters are combined with a bachelor's in a shorter program and so on. And so that it varies from case to case. The key relevant thing is, were you admitted to the MSc program or to the PhD program? That's what is the defining thing. Then, what courses you should be taking is really a topic to discuss in detail with your supervisory committee. So obviously, if you've had a course in statistical mechanics with a certain textbook at a certain level of rigor in another grad school, and then you come and they're saying, well, you should take the same one here, you can talk to supervisory committee and they may say this isn't the right thing for you if you've already had that exact same experience, basically. So that's something to be discussed with the supervisory committee and with me.
Great. Thank you. There are a bunch of questions that have not been upvoted or downvoted, so I'm just going to select one of them myself. So here is the question we're going to try and answer. A lot of students found recorded video course material to be very useful during the pandemic. Could professors be encouraged by the department to have online recorded material available, even for courses that are in person, whether we go into a shutdown or not?
Do you want to go for this, Roger?
Sure. I mean, that's basically what we are doing. We are going to be, in fact, we're having a department council meeting later this afternoon, where I think that will be the message from Eric, our AC undergraduate. We've purchased these owls. We're looking at either webcams or some sort of handycam thing to record whiteboard in a more accurate way, because that's the one weakness of the owls. IST, which is the Central University sort of IT place, they are in the middle of purchasing a system that will allow online recording and editing of video content. So things are a little bit nebulous at the moment of exactly how we're going to manage this. We have some plans in place, but there's some details that still have to get sorted out. But we are definitely encouraging instructors at both the graduate and undergraduate levels to record their lectures, because it's not just students arriving late. It's not just whether we go into a shutdown. We're going to have people isolating, right? If you get tested positive for COVID, you're away from campus for 10 days. And we want to be able to cover you when you're away for campus for 10 days with recorded material. So we are very much already encouraging instructors to do that. So I'm hoping that there will be a large uptake among instructors. Ultimately, it's difficult for us to insist that instructors do this, but we are definitely going to be encouraging them to do this, yes.
Great, thank you. I don't know, Craig, if you want to chime in, or we can leave it there and go to the next question.
Exactly what Roger said is perfect.
Okay, so this is our next question, and there's kind of two questions that I'll kind of group there as well. So there's a question about COVID testing and influence on students who are trying to study. Will students who get positive results be able to attend classes remotely? Will you provide this option for them? And then it's asking about kind of balancing these human rights issues and access to education with some of the policy. And kind of there was a follow-up question that I'm also seeing here. Will students with positive results of COVID tests be able to get the second test just to decrease the possibility of wrong results? So this is just making sure that those are not false positives. So maybe could we address both those questions?
The first one, I think Roger basically just addressed in his previous answer. And the second one, I think we don't have the answer for that. We don't have any information.
I'm seeing nods from Roger, so I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we just don't know what the policy is going to be yet. So, I mean, I think, unfortunately, the answer there has to be wait and see what Central comes up with, because they're developing this policy now. And these are going to be the exact same concerns that they're worried about, that you've asked questions on. So I'm anticipating that the policy they come up with will have good answers for these concerns.
Okay, so I have another question that I'm going to pop up, but I feel like I already know what the answer to this is, because we don't really have a lot of details on any of these, but this question is about consequences. So what is the stick end of this policy about reporting for regular COVID testing? And maybe I can add a question on top of this, which is, will TAs be given any sort of power to either monitor this or make sure that there are no people who are breaking these policies who are coming to their classes?
So I can, in my past role, I became somewhat aware of the rules surrounding lectures and things. So some of these things apply to that. So what I can tell you is what was reported in the paper this morning, which is the most up-to-date information I have, is that the university is going to regard providing false information on the form as a disciplinary offence. And for students, that would fall under the Code of Student Behaviour. And for faculty and staff, that would fall under the relative collective agreement. So providing false information and it is going to be, there are going to be consequences. Exactly what those are, I don't know, but it will be dealt with through the relevant channel for whoever person has committed a transgression. In terms of being able to enforce this in courses, there are rules around instructors being able to exclude students from courses for limited periods of time for disruptive behavior. And so not following university policy by not wearing masks or you would have to be presumably not wearing masks because that's all you're going to be able to see as a TA in the course. There are clear rules around that, and my guess would be is that those are going to be the rules that they would follow for incidents like this. And so basically you can exclude a student from a class for some period of time if they are disruptive, which I'm guessing here will be the same things, and then it has to be referred up the chain of command to the dean's office for disciplinary action. But that little bit there is my guess of how it will work. But we do have mechanisms for this sort of thing. But again, we're going to have to wait and see what the official rules are. But this is exactly, I mean, these questions have been raised well, I was in a meeting with the vice provost and they were raised to her and she is taking them forward because these obviously have to get answered.
Wonderful, thank you. Craig, I don't know if you want to either follow up or actually address what you just put in the comment.
I think Roger answered that as well as it can be. I just responded to Zoe on the chat who mentioned that her committee asked her to take 4, even though she was only required to take 2 for the PhD. And I did fail to mention that before, that supervisory committee can certainly require you to take additional courses if they think that is beneficial for your research.
Great. So we are coming up on 5 minutes left in this question period. So if you do have any questions, please put them in the slide question and answer box. This should be a fairly quick question to answer. Will mandatory rapid tests be free? So Roger or Craig?
I don't know, but I would hope so.
Yeah. Great. Give me a second to pull up. Okay, I see a question. Yes, this is Zoe already put this in the chat, but I will also quickly share it. Will we be asked which courses we prefer to TA? Do we expect that communication to happen anytime soon?
I think that will probably happen next week is my guess. That's the logical time frame that Al will be putting this together.
Great. And then here's the next question. What does the TA boot camp entail?
So that's it's a several hour long event that takes place for new students on, it's usually the first day of classes. So we actually will cancel the grad courses on that day because so many of the students are missing. And it basically kind of, the idea is just that the UGL director runs this with some of the senior TAs and kind of instructs TAs on how best to deal with questions that happen in the labs and how to deal with labs and responsibilities that are part of the TA requirements.
Great. I only have one more question left in the slide, so let's get that up. And this is just about the professional development requirement. Might be a kind of a broad question, but maybe you can give us a rundown of what this requirement really is.
So concisely, the U of A requires that grad students spend a certain amount of time in both their MSc and their PhD, learning about basically spending some time developing their professional competencies, both for things within the academic community and also possibly for learning about things outside that. Basically, we want you to have plans beyond getting the degree, right? After that, we want you to have a plan for where you're going after that. And so that's the basic idea of the professional development requirement. So if you're new and haven't yet got information about that, more information about the professional development requirement will be coming with the grad student orientation and other things beyond that. So you'll learn all about that.
Wonderful. Okay, so we only have 2 minutes left till 2 o'clock. Let me quickly address. We will be sending out a link with a YouTube link to this exact meeting. So if you want to go back and listen to some of these answers again, that will be provided to you sometime today or tomorrow. So I'm not seeing any more questions, which is perfect timing. So maybe what I'll do is actually let Craig, Roger close out the session. And maybe give how you would like to be contacted and what you would like to be contacted if students have any questions about certain segments of their graduate student experience. So maybe Roger, do you want to?
Sure. So probably the best way to get hold of me is via email. I can put that in the chat. If you don't, it is online as well. So contact me via email if you have questions or concerns. But if it's more on the sort of the academic technical side of grad student programs, then Craig is definitely the person to talk to about that, because he's far more up to date and up to speed than I am with those sorts of things. So please contact Craig about those. But if it's general concerns about COVID and things like that, then by all means contact me. Once term starts, I should be in the office a lot more, so you can also stop by and we can have a masked conversation or whatever the rules are at that point about it. And then I think the only last thing to say is, if you aren't vaccinated, get vaccinated as soon as you can, and let's make sure we don't have any outbreaks on campus. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much. And Craig?
Yes, thank you all for inviting me. I've dropped my email address in there. And I think the last thing I'll just mention is, there's this last year and a half has been particularly stressful, and there's all kinds of issues that people are dealing with besides the normal difficulties of grad school. And if you're having serious issues with something, or even you're not sure that necessarily is serious, but you're really worried about something, do talk to somebody. And there's lots of avenues who you can talk to. So your supervisor is generally somebody who you can talk to, but there's also other grad students. The GPSA are wonderul people and are happy to hear questions that if you're reluctant to bring them to faculty, and you're always encouraged to bring things to me if I can be of help in any way. And if nothing else, I can just listen. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you both. Wonderful that you could join us for this Q&A. I think it's been very helpful to a lot of people. So we'll let you go, and then yeah, thank you again. All right, bye-bye. And I am going to